For the past 3 years, we've been attending a nerd festival in Iceland called EVE Fanfest, a weekend-long celebration all about the massive internet spaceship game EVE Online. It's a festival where thousands of fans of the game meet up, chat about space, listen to developers talk about space, and drink a lot of booze whilst doing those spacey things. I didn't really know much about EVE, but while I was there, I started hearing hushed stories about this one guy called the Mittani.
He's like the big image of the big bad guy controlling everything from behind the scenes.
He can push the right buttons at the right moment.
He's very noisy. Loud people get noticed, and he basically has a finger in everything.
Everyone kind of likes him because he's sort of one of the driving forces in the game.
He's having this you hate him or you love him.
He feeds off the energy of others, and that can sometimes be a little extreme.
He knows his stuff, and he plays the game well, even though he doesn't log in.
The EVE Online community is one of the most passionate and interesting groups of nerds I've ever encountered. The guys behind EVE, CCP Games, have created this massive open universe online, which more than 500,000 players have taken over and made their own function in society with. So if you want to spend your time transporting space rocks to make in-game money, which has a real-world value, you can do that. But for those who are a bit more ambitious, you can do something else altogether, like becoming the maniacal leader of a giant space organization. One guy who did just that is Alexander John Turco, better known as the Mittani.
The Mittani is probably playing EVE in a way that nobody anticipated would be possible when EVE Online first launched. He's like in a sociologist's dream because he's watching these things happen where he has 20, 30,000 people who do whatever he says. And he's talked to me before about how that can be almost depressing because people sometimes want to subsume themselves to a dictator, and he is that dictator.
His organization, when he started, he was like basically a small time kind of guy, and started doing intelligence work basically in EVE, which was like one of those taboo things. And since then, people are actually spying, their counterintelligence networks, all kinds of crap. It's almost like being a spy in real life, except you don't have to worry about getting shot by the Russians.
CCP don't like to comment on the actions of individual players, but the head of the company, a lovely red-headed Viking named Hilmar, had this to say.
What the Mittani is doing is exactly what the game is built to be doing. So whether we like him or not, that doesn't really matter. We built a game to create intergalactic space overlords, and he is one. I think that's pretty cool. It's exactly what we wanted. We want to be the janitors. We want to put the players on stage. They control the agenda. So he is doing exactly what we aim to create. And if people don't like him doing that, then the game offers multiple ways to go and address that.
As well as leading the Goon Swarm Federation, EVE Online's biggest fleet of players, the Mittani also runs the Mittani.com gaming site. I spoke to one of his many minions who helped run the site, and he told us all about what it was like meeting the Mittani for the first time.
There was some nervousness, so I went for a fist bump. We kind of missed the fist bump. He was like, just give me a hug. So we hugged it out. It's a great way to sort of break the ice, just to go straight for the man hug. I'm a huggable person anyway, so that worked for me. And then it was quite down to business. Asked a few very personal questions which put me off guard, and I think they were meant to. Just as an example, he asked me if I was heterosexual, which is not the sort of question I was expecting at the time. I was like, I don't think he was at all interested in the answer. I think it was just to put me off guard, and then he followed up with other questions, and it was just to gauge my response. But it's very difficult not to be intimidated by a man with an entourage.
I really wanted to ask the Mittani how he came to such power in the first place, but after initially seeming keen on the idea of an interview, the Mittani stopped replying to my emails. Something which his minion told me was down to the fact that he believed I had an agenda.
My name is Alexander John Turco, and my EVE name is the Mittani.
Luckily, we'd already done an interview with him though, way back in 2013, when he was very keen to tell us what it was like to be the dictator of an internet spaceship federation.
I run Goon Swarm Federation, which is a large alliance in the northwest quadrant of the galaxy. We also lead a coalition of alliances called the Cluster Coalition. I guess that's about 40,000 characters, so probably 30,000 humans. There's a lot of warlordism in EVE, and I guess me and a few other people here are that way, and you rile people up to go to war by, invoking the dynamics of us versus them, our culture is stronger than their culture, because a war in EVE is a very difficult thing. It's not easy to snap your fingers and go to war. You have to convince people to to devote their time to besting a foe. We have always had a ruthless attitude towards the game because it's a ruthless game, and we operate under the principle of best possible friend, worst possible enemy. So if we end up in a conflict with someone, we try to make the experience as unpleasant as is humanly possible. Because when it comes down to it, you can't always assume that your enemies are going to be honorable. You can't assume that they're going to restrain themselves. And the best way to avoid a war that you don't want is to have your enemies be afraid of coming after you in the first place.
Of all the tales of the Mittani's evil doings I've heard, one of the worst things was what took place at Fanfest 2012. Unsurprisingly, at a festival that attracts a load of Viking video gamers, there's a big boozing element to the event, and whilst under the influence of said booze, the Mittani insulted an enemy player who was suffering with depression and suggested to the audience at home as well as the thousands watching online that they should encourage the player who was recently divorced to kill himself.
Alright, so now I'm going to guilt trip you all. I want to read a little disclaimer before I read this post. He's not dead. What do you think? He might actually have killed himself, but I'm just going to lie to you all and tell you that we're sure that he's not dead. He might have committed suicide. Since my divorce, all I want to do is die. And I've been doing that a lot lately. Incidentally, if you want to make the guy kill himself, his name is... Find him.
The Mittani issued an apology on the EVE forums, resigned from his post as an EVE council chairman, and was banned from logging into EVE for 30 days. A punishment that probably wasn't that bad for a guy who is famous for not logging into the game ever. But is he evil? The line between the Mittani's evil business in-game and the actions of Alex Janturko became a bit blurred at FanFest in 2012, but since then, Alex has gone to great lengths to ensure nothing like that ever happens again. At least not on stage in front of loads of people anyway.
In EVE, unlike in many other games, it's actually quite valuable to be seen as a raving sociopath, because then people aren't going to mess with your people if they think that Goonstorm is led by a madman.